Welcome to the Performance Enhancing Podcast. It's like steroids for your brain. A podcast for people looking to live life at their peak potential, chock full of real-world tools and knowledge that you can apply in your life today. By providing you with a lens into the lives, beliefs, practices, and actions of those who are already living extraordinary lives, the Performance Enhancing Podcast will help you shift your mindset or create that change in your daily rituals and habits so you can explode with success in the areas of life that are most important to you. So get ready for another dose of Performance Enhancing Podcast with SatoriPrime. Here's your host, Ilan Ferdman.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another Performance Enhancing Podcast with your host, Ilan Ferdman. So part 2 of Dr. Michael Bruce is about to head your way. And if you didn't know, Dr. Bruce is a sleep doctor and created a book called The Power of When, discussing when are the best times, not only for sleep, but for you to eat certain foods, to exercise, to have sex, to talk with your children, have creative ideas, be analytical, all of that kind of stuff. And each one of us has our own times of day that work better than others. So really, really interesting. But in this one, we talk about a few other things that I thought were really awesome. One is how to deal with jet lag. So for those of you that travel a lot, this is going to be really, really useful. Certain things to do to reduce caffeine in your body, which were astounding, really, really cool things. How to properly take melatonin and how to prepare before travel so that you can avoid jet lag as well, and a bunch of other things as well. So enjoy part 2 of my interview with Dr. Michael Bruce. And as a last call, this is really, really the last of it. If you still want to come to our live event, you can still do that. You just head over to youwillhaveitall.com/live. This is pretty much your last opportunity to come join us in San Diego. So final call here, November 3rd through the 5th. Again, youwillhaveitall.com/live. Looking forward to seeing some of your smiling faces and giving you guys big old bear hugs. So get your way to San Diego. Bye, everyone. The question is, does the fact that I'm messing with my circadian rhythm and going out of its natural state, is that somehow hurting me in the long run? Or can a person switch their schedule such that they kind of adjust to the new schedule?
So what I would argue is you've actually switched to what is your appropriate circadian rhythm now. I would argue that you're actually in flow and you're actually where you're supposed to be, because the timing that you're discussing is perfect for a bear. And also, one of the other things that I would argue is that you say that your brain is done at a certain point in time in the afternoon. It's actually not. That is the perfect time for doing creative types of things. So we now know that the brain has times where it's very acute and it can get into data and analytics and be super sharp. But at those times when you're kind of fuzzy, that is when your brain can actually be more creative. So as an example, you know, I always ask people, like, can you pick certain times when you've had a great idea, and what were you doing during that time? A lot of people say I was in the shower, or I was riding a bike, or
always the shower.
Right. So here's what's going on there is you're busy, you're washing your hair, you're washing your body, you're distracted, and it's probably in the morning, you're still a little bit groggy, and when you're physically distracted and you're mentally not all there, it's the perfect time for information to coalesce and create great creative ideas. That can happen, especially for bears, in the morning and then in the later part of the afternoon. For wolves, it's different. So for me, I know that my best creative time actually turns out to be around 10 o'clock in the morning and then very late at night, like 11:30 at night. And there's a couple of different reasons why that might occur. One is something that we call the REM rhythm. So REM sleep is a stage of sleep where you do a lot of dreaming, but it also happens to be a stage of sleep where you move information from your short-term memory to your long-term memory. And you create that organizational structure in your brain to create little bridges between that piece of information and new information that comes in. And that's what helps you solve problems. Believe it or not, that old adage of sleep on it actually really works. Yeah. So in our house, if you've got a major decision that you've got to make, sleep on it first, because your brain will kind of put all that information together. Well, you have more REM sleep in the last part of the night than you do in the first part of the night. So when you wake up in the morning, you're coming out of REM sleep, which is a great time to have some of those great creative ideas. So I tell people, keep a voice recorder right by the bedside. And right before you even get out of bed, just start thinking about the cool, interesting things that are going to happen to you that day, or problems that you're trying to solve, or things like that. And voice record it. Don't try to write it all down. Don't try to get to the details. Just do broad brushstrokes, big ideas. The same holds true in the late afternoon to early evening, especially for bears like you. If you keep a voice recorder, everybody's got them on their phone anyway. Just click, audio note or whatever, and just start throwing some stuff out there. And you will be shocked at how interesting and creative it is. I don't think you're actually going past your chronorhythm. I think you actually went closer to your chronorhythm. Now, you may be away from what you want. That's a different story. But kids can throw all that off, because kids wake up, especially small kids, wake up super early in the morning. Right. And they're lions by nature. So, lots of babies are up by 5:30, 6 o'clock. It was funny because I was up at, I go to bed at midnight and I wake up around 6:30, because that just works really well for me. I only need about 6.5 hours of sleep. And by the way, that's a myth for people out there. If you think everybody out there needs 8, that's not true. There's no data to suggest that that's true. People need different amounts of sleep, and it's also going to change as you age, medical frailty, things like that. But once you kind of figure out what your number is and your timing, it actually works out really well. But there was a baby crying at the house next door. And we could hear this. I mean, this guy was wailing, and, and it was funny because there's a couple, they just moved in next door, and we met them yesterday, and this adorable little guy. And my wife was like, "Oh, I remember those days." And you do, right? You remember when your children were up at 5:30 and they're hungry, so they're pissed and they want to eat, and anything you can do to calm them down and settle them down, you want to do, because your chronorhythm is very different than theirs. So the good news here is you're not doing anything that's messing you up. And in fact, you're probably closer to your true rhythm as a bear than you were before.
Interesting. So people, to make those shifts, like for me, for example, last night, so we had a power outage in the middle of the night. And for whatever reason, when the power goes out, my alarm system kicks back in and starts beeping in the house. Ugh. So I don't even know what time it was. It was like 3 a.m. or something. And what I've noticed is if I don't get uninterrupted sleep, like if my sleep is interrupted, even if I were to get 7 hours, I still wake up and I'm just exhausted.
Right.
Does that screw people up as well?
It does. And so there's a decent amount of data to show that the big block of sleep has a tendency to work out well for people. Now, what's really interesting is if you look at it from an evolutionary perspective, back when we were an agrarian society, so back before the light bulb, right? Back before the Industrial Revolution, when we were all farmers and hunters and gatherers and things like that, what would happen is people would go to sleep when the sun went down. They would sleep for about 4 or 5 hours. Then they would wake up in the middle of the night. They would eat, have sex, converse with other people, because everybody was living in these large homes all together. Then they would go back to sleep for what we call their second sleep, right? And then they would sleep until the sun rose. And when the sun rose, you got to get on the farm. You got to do all this stuff, right? And so that was kind of how things went. As soon as the invention of the light bulb came about, everything got messed up. And it's kind of interesting because Thomas Edison is quoted as saying, that sleep is unnecessary. Sleep is for the weak, all this kind of stuff. And he did something about it. He changed everybody's sleep forever, because once we had the light bulb, of course, we could work at night. And so what ended up happening was our sleep time started to squunch down into this 7 to 9 hour block, if you will. And that's where it's kind of interesting. And now what we're finding is that people actually, if they sleep continuously throughout the evening, like what you're talking about, they actually wake up feeling far more refreshed than if there's an awakening in the middle of the night. And a lot of that has to do with how sleep works. So I explain this to people all the time. Sleep is a lot like a baseball game. Okay. So if you're going to go see a baseball game, the game starts at 8, right? If you show up at 9:30, they don't restart the game. Right? Right? The game is still going on, right? And if you show up at 6:30, all you're going to see is batting practice, right? And so your circadian rhythm is very, very particular. And if you don't kind of follow that circadian rhythm, it's going to be difficult. What would be interesting to do an experiment with you would be to have you going to bed at the right time and getting up at the right time. And then if you did have that interruption, where in the cycle of the interruption has the most effect on you, right? Because what happens is you still got to go through inning 1, inning 2, inning 3. Oh, you woke up. Guess what? You actually do have to go back because there's certain dance moves you got to do within the sleep cycle. And so that's where you're having the hang up.
Yeah, very interesting. I think last night it was like 3:30. I think, I have no idea, but I've noticed that's accurate, because if I wake up, and it also depends on the season, right? So
Yes.
if I wake up, for example, during the summer, when the sun is up around, like 5:20, 5:30, it's starting to come through my windows. So say it's like I wake up at like 5 and you can kind of see already, sun breaking or whatever. I have a much tougher time than to get back into that zone.
Yes.
And at those moments, like today, I'm just like, F it, I'll just wake up, I'll meditate, I'll start my day early. Whereas before I would really try to force myself back to sleep.
Right. So that has a lot to do with light exposure.
Yeah.
Right. And you actually already intimated that. So one of the things we know in psychology is there's this thing called SAD, or seasonal affective disorder, the winter blues. Right. And so when people don't have as much light exposure to them based on the seasons, right? So in wintertime, when our planet is far away from the sun, as opposed to summertime when our planet is close to the sun, there's different amounts of light that are getting in. Light is one of those things that we call it's a weird word. It's called a Zeitgeber. And what that means is it's kind of it's a reset button. Right. So when light hits the eye, there are certain cells in your eye called melanopsin cells. And these are very, very sensitive to a particular frequency of light. It turns out 460 nanometers are what we call blue light. So you've probably seen people talk about, my device has got blue light and it's screwing up my sleep. Well, it actually is. And so being able to like either wear blue blockers or get a shield, or now I believe that Apple has something called night shift on their telephones that dims the brightness, or Flux, FLU.X is a free program people can download and put onto their computers. That level of light turns out to be very, very effective. I would actually go as far as to say that light is medicine, right? And I can actually show you studies where if we expose people to certain wavelengths of light, we actually get reduction in Alzheimer's symptoms.
Wow.
Oh yeah. We get reduction in depression. We get reduction in anxiety. It's unbelievable. I mean, again, cutting edge. Start to look at light therapies that are going to be evolved out there. And you already identified, there's a seasonality to it. Absolutely. And that kind of messes with our sleep.
Yeah. Interesting. I work with this doctor, and one of the things he told me is that in my house, like to have, it's called like reptile light, or it's like a UV, like a very specific UV to actually shine on my body, especially during the winter, because you're not outside, you're not doing this. It's like, it makes a huge difference. So I've just been messing with it. I mean, it's hard to pinpoint like, oh my God, I feel so much better, but also winter is starting. So I guess I'll know. Question for those that travel. So entrepreneurs tend to travel a lot, conferences, speaking here, speaking there, whatever. Different time zones, things like that.
Right.
Are there any secrets or things that actually work on helping with jet lag, staying consistent on your rhythm, things like that you could share?
Absolutely. So first of all, there are some really good jet lag calculators out there. So if you just go to the App Store and you type in jet lag calculator, there's a couple of really kind of cool things to check out. I'm going to be coming out with, I work with a company that's going to be coming out with one probably in the next few months, and I'll kind of ping back to you and let you know about it. But jet lag turns out to be a little bit more complicated than people thought, because it's about your rhythm. Then it's about what is the timing that you're going to, what is the direction of your travel, because that can have a pretty large effect on you. So I'll tell you a funny story. So I have a patient who's an Arabian princess, actually. Like, she's really from Saudi Arabia and is a princess.
She's the real Jasmine.
Right, exactly. She's the real Jasmine. And she comes over from Saudi Arabia to Los Angeles, which is where I live. And she has philanthropic things. And she's just beat up by jet lag. And so what we did was we looked at the timing of light exposure, caffeine, melatonin, and napping. And we used those 4 things to be able to create very specific jet lag schedules. Generally speaking, I tell people all the time, east is least and west is best. So if you're going to be traveling west, it's much easier, because all I'm asking you to do is stay up a little bit later.
Yep.
But if you're traveling east, it's not so easy to go to bed at 7:30. So that's one thing to think about. I've investigated this a lot, and there's none of the jet lag diets have any real good data behind them, unfortunately. There's some great ideas back there, but I haven't seen anybody who's got like hardcore data. I'm a data guy, so if I can see and find data, I'm all over it. And I haven't found any of those jet lag diets to be that effective.
What about those? So the couple of things that I've heard, I haven't used them. I've used the grounding. I've heard.
I like grounding actually.
I heard wherever you get, barefoot, get on grass, somewhere like your hotel, whatever, just
absolutely
walk
that
around.
Works.
that I've actually have seen a different effect in. The other thing that a buddy of mine said, there's these like LED lights that you
go in your ears. Okay, so I've seen the company, I have played with the device, and unfortunately, I'm not convinced yet. I think there's some really interesting data about light and where light can be effective. And I'm not, I wish I could turn to you and say, hey, those things work like a charm or those things suck, because I can't tell you one way or another. Here's what I can say is I've played with them and they were not effective for me, but I loved the idea. And I think that there are people where they can be effective, but really start to dig deep on the data. I actually sent the device over to some of my buddies at NASA and they were like, yeah, we would never use these. Well, and it's interesting, you got to think about the subjects that they're dealing with, right? So they control the space station. And so as an example, we have very, very specialized lighting in the space station because they have a new day every 90 minutes. Okay. So the space station whips around the Earth every 90 minutes.
Wow.
Right. And so when you think about it from a circadian rhythm perspective, it gets really interesting really quickly, right? And so you're thinking, all right, I've got these highly trained, superhumans who are out in space. And when do they sleep? When do they wake up? When do they go on a spacewalk? When do they do certain experiments? Like if you fuck up there, people die, know? You've got to really kind of know what you're doing up there. And so we use very specific lighting. Actually, there's a group that your listeners should know about. It's called Lighting Science Group. You can look them up on the internet. I think their website is lighting.science. And they have actually got now commercially available light bulbs because I use these in my house. I have specialized light bulbs and they actually filter out the blue light. So as an example, with my bedside table lamp, it's imperceptible. It's not like I'm like in this weird kind of opium den looking space. It's like these light bulbs. You can't really tell the difference and you can use them easily. And then I have ones that are literally the same consistency as the sun in my bathroom. And so I get all the blue light in my bathroom and none of the blue light in my bedroom. So it's a good way to transition to help me wake up. It's also really good for winter time when we were talking before about this, what I call chrono seasonality, right? And so during the winter, when you don't have as much light exposure, sometimes these bulbs can actually be very effective.
That's really, really cool. I want to go back to you were mentioning with this Arabian princess. We'll call her Jasmine.
We'll call her Jasmine.
That you use different things like, which way they're traveling, things like that. But caffeine has come up a few times in your description. I'm a big proponent of, I actually drink decaf because I love the flavor of coffee. Mm-hmm. But people are like, well, you don't take caffeine. I was like, no, I take caffeine in pills. Because for me, it's an actual dose. I know exactly what the effect will be. Mm-hmm. I mix it with L-theanine, which
so that probably gets the jitters away.
Exactly. And for a lot of people, like friends of mine who are like, I can't drink caffeine. I'm like, just try this. Like it's amazing alertness, etc. Mm-hmm. So when you're traveling, what I've actually, I feel like I self-medicate sometimes, but
that's okay.
I went to Vegas and I had to talk on stage for 2 days. Mm-hmm. So I travel the day before, right? Schedule gets all thrown off. I'm traveling in a plane for 6 hours. When I get there, it's breakfast time again, really. Right. So what I found for me, and I'm curious to know your take on, is like I try to get myself on the meal schedule of wherever I'm going as quickly as possible, even if that means eating another breakfast. Mm-hmm. And I will basically use caffeine to offset kind of like when I would get tired to stay up later. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And then at night, which I don't really like, but I do it when I travel, I'll take like it's like a Tylenol PM without the Tylenol, whatever they're like.
It's just diphenhydramine. It's Benadryl.
Yeah. And I'll just take one of those. And then that way I know I'll like sleep through the night.
Okay. So I'm going to teach you some tricks. Okay. So first of all, most people don't know this, but broccoli has a tendency to be able to pull caffeine out of your system very, very quickly.
Okay.
I don't know why. There's been 2 studies to show that it actually helps reduce caffeine levels. So everybody has a very particular way in which they metabolize caffeine. Some people are fast metabolizers, some people are slow metabolizers. A couple of quick facts about caffeine. So number one, the average half-life of caffeine is between 6 and 9 hours. So that means that half of the caffeine dose that you took is still there about 6 to 9 hours later. You need about half of it gone in order to be able to fall asleep. I would recommend, though, instead of taking the Benadryl, which can make you kind of logy the next day, and don't forget, Benadryl is an antihistamine. The compound was built to last for 12 hours, right? And so that's why people get a hangover from the PM medications or those Benadryls. So number one, have broccoli at dinner. Okay, because that'll help pull some of that caffeine out. And it turns out that magnesium is actually incredibly good for calming people down and helping them. Also, melatonin can be very, very effective at that point in time. Now, I don't like people taking melatonin every single night, right?
Yes.
I like people taking melatonin when they need it. So in your situation, when you're going from East Coast to Vegas, then it might actually be worthwhile. A couple things to think about though, okay? So 95% of the melatonin out there is sold in an overdosage format. So be careful. The appropriate dose is between 0.5 and 1 milligram. All right. And so people need to either buy 2 milligram tablets and crack them in half, or 1 milligram tablets and crack them in half, depending upon what they need. So that's number one, is get the right dose. Oh, and by the way, the only place that I've seen where it sells it in 0.5 milligram has been Trader Joe's.
Interesting.
Yeah. And it comes in 500 micrograms, which is 0.5 milligram.
Got it.
So that's number one. Number two, it takes approximately 90 minutes for plasma concentration levels to reach the point where it could help induce sleep. So you need to take it an hour and a half before you want to go to bed.
Yeah.
So 0.5 milligram to 1 milligram, 90 minutes before what would be your lights out. Now, what's interesting, what you do is intuitively brilliant, because if you get yourself on, your second brain is your gut. Okay. And when you travel, your head is not something that you can affect very easily unless you induce caffeine, melatonin, you put some substance in. You can, however, affect your gut by the timing of your meals.
Yeah.
Right? And so you're very, very smart in doing this by going ahead and moving your body to the meal schedule of where you're going. Even if you can do it a day or two ahead of time, it works even better.
Yeah.
Have you found that to be
true here?
Yeah.
Oh, interesting. I never thought of that. That's a great idea.
So it's a way to prep for you to get there, right? Is just 1 or 2 days ahead of time, start to move your meal schedule a little bit, because when you get there, if you're on the same meal schedule, everything works a lot easier.
Interesting. So basically, like, figure out the place that I'm going. So say like I'm going to California, so it's 3 hours earlier.
Right.
So move all of my stuff 3 hours later, basically.
Exactly.
Wow. I would have never thought of that. I love that tip.
And it works really, really well. But don't immediately do it 3 hours. For one day, do it an hour. Then the second day, 2 hours. Then the third day, the 3 hours.
Scale it.
Line yourself up so that it makes a lot of sense. And you'll be surprised at how well it works. Quick tip about melatonin for folks out there who are listening. A couple things you need to be careful about. Okay, so melatonin is not regulated by the FDA, which means I can make it in my garage and sell it at the local health food store. So you really want to look at purity standards. So, make sure that you're getting it from a reputable company. And on their website, it should talk about how they use pharmaceutical grade clean rooms and things like that for all the raw materials to be able to make the melatonin. If you can't find it on their website, call the company. If the company says, well, we don't really give out that information, you don't want their product.
Don't buy it.
Okay, just don't go anywhere near that shit. The other thing is that melatonin is by prescription only in Europe. A lot of people don't know that. And at high dosages, it's a contraceptive.
Wow.
Okay. So here's where the real problem comes in is, so a lot of people have children who don't sleep very well. And they say, oh, well, melatonin's natural. I'll just give that to my kids. I can't anything worse for a young female developing body than to put a contraceptive in there. We just don't know what's going to happen. I have a daughter. She will never take melatonin. I'm laying it out there. I can't prove it. I don't have any data yet, but I'm not going to find out.
Wow. That's shocking.
Yeah. So you have to think through a lot of these things. Remember, melatonin is a hormone, right? It's not an herb. It's not a supplement. It's a hormone, right? And so you wouldn't walk into, the local, health food store and say, hey, give me some testosterone or give me some estrogen. It doesn't work that way. But unfortunately, melatonin is a hormone and it is very easily accessible. So, be smart, be careful.
Wow. Well, I have two questions for you. One, just like way out there, because my brain just went there.
Sure.
With what's happening with genetics and what we know and all that stuff, a lot of the stuff that you had mentioned seems like sleep is predicated on our genetics.
Yes.
Do you see that in the future we will be able to basically control people's sleep based on purely like modifying genetics?
So so you're talking about Frankenstein sleep, right? So you're talking right. You're talking about, can I build an individual, genetically speaking, from a sleep perspective, to do certain things or not require as much sleep or get certain amounts of sleep at certain times? I think theoretically it's possible. I think we're a long way off from doing something like that. Although I will tell you, since the release of the book, I am getting quite a few companies who are calling me up and saying, hey, would you be interested in working in our genome project? Or
yeah, I can imagine
stuff like that, because we know that there's some very particular biomarkers, some very particular genetic markers within sleep that'll tell us a lot of interesting stuff. And so I think we're far away from it, but is it possible? I think theoretically it could be.
What's on your horizon? Like, what do you see right now as next for you, and where this book, Power of One, is going to take you, and what's exciting you like about this research in the next few years?
Well, here's what's cool is, I've kind of figured this stuff out with my patients, and I was like, well, shoot, let's write a book about it. And I've gotten some great feedback. People love taking the quiz. I'm really interested now in seeing what else can we do with the power of when. As an example, I don't know if you're familiar with Dave Asprey from.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I was talking with Dave, and he was like, can you chronotype my entire organization? And then can we schedule our meetings based on people's chronotypes? And I was like, I bet I could. This could be cool. So I think what I'm starting to see for me is I'm starting to being asked to do a lot more lectures and come into companies and do more consulting, because I think I can hack people's productivity because of their chronotype. And I think that is kind of where I'm headed next with this. If the book does well and enough people buy it, then I'll get asked to write another one. And then I think the next one might even be like the chronotype in the workplace, the power of when for work, or the power of when for, women's health, or new moms, or kids, or things like that. I'd like to see that kind of thing happen. Obviously it's all predicated on, if people are liking the book and buy the book and that kind of thing. But I'm definitely excited about those kind of things as well.
Sorry.
Yeah, it's okay.
Okay. So where can people get the book? How do people find out?
Sure. So if people want to come to my website, thepowerofwhen.com or thepowerofwhenquiz.com, you can take the quiz, and there you can just click on Amazon right there, buy the book. If you want to go to your local bookseller, that's fine too. It's available almost anywhere. It's in a lot of airport bookstores now, which is really fun for people who are traveling around. That's the places that people can get it. For more information about me, my website is thesleepdoctor.com.
Yeah. Also available I had the audio version, which was awesome. So it's available, I'm sure, on Kindle.
On Kindle, audio, all that stuff. Absolutely.
Pick your weapon of choice. So for me, I just have to say thank you for doing this work. I have a feeling this will evolve into something really special. Kind of like what we've been talking about here. I think it's going to go into these very like nano parts and micro things, athletics, entrepreneurship, meetings at work, fitness, things like that, moms, how to sleep, and all that stuff. And I think people should follow you just to see where this goes, aside from getting the book, because I'm really curious where this kind of technology goes. I'm a biohacker myself, as Dave Asprey is, and I'm sure you are as well too. Yep. So just thank you for doing what you do, and thank you for sharing this with the world. And for everyone that's listening, I highly, highly, highly encourage you guys to go grab this book. Even if you don't struggle with sleep, which I don't. I told Dr. Bruce before, like, I sleep great. My head hits the pillow, I'm unconscious, my alarm rings, still kind of unconscious. I got nothing about that. But just even rejiggering my day of when I work out, when I eat certain things, when I do this and this was really interesting to mess with. So definitely go grab it. And thank you for being on here and sharing your wisdom.
Oh, dude, this was fun. I enjoyed it. And anytime you want me back, I'll jump right on.
I'm actually holding you to that because we're launching a new podcast and I'm going to have you on the new one too.
Absolutely. I'd love to do it.
Awesome. Thanks, man. All right. So that wraps it up. Hope you enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed interviewing him. We had a cool conversation after the interview was done. He will definitely be back on the show. And, the new show, which is going to be the Have It All podcast. But it was an absolute blast. We were like, okay, how do we keep in touch? What do we need to do to work on together? So hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. Hope you took a bunch of notes. The jet lag stuff for me was amazing. I know we're planning on going to the event, and I'm traveling West Coast to San Diego. And so I'm definitely going to be doing that from kind of the end of the month to try to get myself prepped so I don't have that bad of a jet lag when I get there. But hope you got some amazing tips here, and definitely go check out the book. It's very sciencey. It's not like a story. It's very factual and kind of down to the basics. So you have to be prepared for that. But really, really super informative. Can't recommend it enough. And definitely go take that quiz, whether you buy the book or not. All right. Love you all, guys. Talk to you soon.